Uh-oh, I didn't mean to do that.
Was that SpongeBob? Are you doing that? Who's SpongeBob?
Is that? Uh-oh.
Are we back recording?
We are back recording. Joy had to log off and it did kick the recording, but I have us recording again.
Okay, can you see my screen? Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So our topics for discussion today, we're going to talk about what aseptic processing is, discuss sterilization, facility design. We'll go over some basic microbiology 101 and cover patient impact, and we will address the beginning parts of environmental monitoring, and we'll go into more details in our overview part 3. Dealing with the environmental monitoring process. So aseptic processing is a term that we use where we manufacture a sterile product, which means it's free of microorganisms, it's packaged in a sterile container in a manner that maintains sterility. So the individual parts are sterilized, and then we have to figure out how do we put 1, 2, and 3 together and end up with 4, and they all remain sterile. So that's the hardest part about aseptic processing, is figuring out how to put everything together without having people, the environment, or the machinery contaminate that existing sterility. So we use a term APA commonly, which just stands for our aseptic processing area. So this is going to be the part of a facility where the aseptic processing occurs. It's specifically designed for that reason and is regulated to make sure that sterility is maintained. We monitor the humidity, we monitor the temperature, we monitor air pressure, we do yearly tests to check on the airflow in the area, to make sure that we're maintaining control and that the process is not adding to any contamination in our product. So what do we think is the most important item to maintain in aseptic processing? You can unmute and answer, or you can drop it in the chat box. What do we think is most important to maintain?
I would think maybe your own body, whoever's working in the area.
Yeah, so reducing contamination. Yeah, any personnel contamination. Anybody else have any ideas?
Environmental.
Yep, we have to maintain the environment as well. So by maintaining our personnel, which is the operators themselves, and maintaining the environment, it helps us to ensure we maintain sterility. That's the number one item that we have to maintain. Every action that we do in an aseptic processing area, we have to conduct with the thought in the back of our mind, I do not want to contaminate this product. How can I prevent myself from contaminating the product? And how can we keep an eye on our machinery, on our processes, so that we are not causing any contamination? So sterilization is very important for aseptic processing. Sterilization is a process where we make something free from bacteria or other microorganisms. There is a term that is similar to sterilization, which is known as sanitization, but however, they both reduce germs, but they're not interchangeable from a pharmaceutical manufacturing standpoint. If I say an item is sterilized, it's gonna be free of all forms of life. Oh, sorry, guys. Go back. It's gonna be free of all forms of life and other biological agents. So it's gonna eliminate them, remove them, kill them. If there's spores there, it's gonna deactivate those spores, versus sanitization, which destroys most microorganisms. And when we sanitize, we use either chemicals or we use heat. So let's say, for instance, we have company X and they produce vitamins for elderly customers. The company decides that sanitization is the best cleaning practice since the vitamins are not injected. Do you think sanitization is the best practice? We forgot to, forgive me, I forgot to activate the poll. So you guys can unmute and answer, or you can answer in the chat. So if we have a company that's making pills that are given to elderly, which are often, well, they can be immunocompromised, weakened immune systems, they can have a myriad of medical issues, and this is something that they're swallowing. Would we want to sanitize this equipment, or would we want to try to sterilize it? What do you guys think?
I would-
Uh,
Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. I would think sterilize to
No.
kill them.
I would agree. Why would you think sterilize is the best? I do absolutely agree. Why do you think it's the best?
To kill all the bacteria and everything.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. We wouldn't want a customer ingesting any type of bacteria that we could prevent them from having in their body that could possibly react to, maybe they're on a medication and they're susceptible to a different form of, let's just say, a different form of flu that somebody with a stronger immune system may not be susceptible for. And then now we've introduced a virus or a bacteria, and that could cause them to have, complications that they otherwise wouldn't have. So that was correct. We definitely would want to sterilize that equipment to make sure that we're protecting our customers and they are receiving a safe product. So how do we sterilize? We have 4 different ways that we commonly sterilize. We use moist heat or steam. We use radiation. We can use a gas known as ethylene oxide. We commonly refer to it as ETO, or we can use filtration. And we're gonna go through each one of these in a little detail. So moist heat is steam sterilization. We can use steam to sterilize our solution tanks. So if you're working in a facility that makes a liquid, let's say we're making cough syrup, we will have a huge tank full of cough syrup. In that tank, in between batches, we can send steam through the tank, we can send steam through the piping, and it kills the germs that way. Because we can't take the tank is so huge, or they're immobilized where we can't take them apart and go to a sink and wash them or put them in a sterilizer machine. So we have to do what's called steaming in place, where the machinery stays in its position and we actually send the steam through the machine. And we would track how long the steam is in the machine, the temperature of the steam, all that would be validated, and then we document, hey, we steamed tank 41 for 30 minutes and it was 140 degrees. Goodness, guys, let me get my charger. Forgive me. Get my charger here. Click off. I'm so sorry. I forgot the charger. Okay. All right. So during our steam sterilization process, we push the steam through the entire solution line, and we would do a steam after a line has already been cleaned. So for example, if we're making grape cough syrup, and then we want to go to bubble gum. After we're finished making all the bottles of the grape cough syrup, we will have a process where we go in and we clean. We try to get majority of the residue out so that the steam now has a surface that it can really work on and penetrate, because otherwise we would just steam a bunch of purple goo. So after we do the cleaning process, we've gotten most of the grape cough syrup out. We're gonna hook up our steam machine. We're gonna steam our tank. And then we would go in and we would start mixing our bubblegum cough syrup for our next lot. Let's say that we have items that we need to sterilize that are not as cumbersome as a tank. For instance, we have some tools that the mechanics need to use, or we have our mop heads to mop the floors that we're walking on in our APA area. We would use what's referred to as a sterilizer. And this is a machine where versus sending the steam to a sedentary piece of machinery, we actually take the item that we want to sterilize to this machine and it sterilizes our smaller items that we're going to be using. So when we use the steam sterilizer, here's a picture of a cart in the upper right-hand corner that's about to go into a sterilizer. We saturate the product under pressure, which is referred to as autoclaving. So the machine tracks the pressure inside of the machine, how hot the steam is, and how long it stays at that temperature. And we have a validation process that makes sure the machine is operating properly as well. And the items that go into the steam sterilizer, they are wrapped in pouches. And here's an example of one with the blue towels here. And then we seal them with a sterilizer tape. The tape has parallel stripes on them. And once the temperature reaches a certain amount, those stripes change colors. So they will go from almost a clear to a dark brown. So that's how we know, hey, this item was in the sterilizer long enough to kill all the germs that were on it. And then we also label the pouches with a preparation date and an expiration date and the person who prepared them. So I may have some towels where we've only tested that they maintain that sterility for 3 months. So if it's 94 days from today, I couldn't use those towels. I would have to essentially trash them because they would be outside of my approved range to use. And on the wrapping that they're in, we have a plastic side. And then on this opposite side is paper, and the steam is able to penetrate the paper side of that pouch that sterilizes the items inside. When we're working with a steam sterilizer, we want to always be sure that we do not overstuff the sterilizer. As the steam penetrates the paper side, we want to be sure that we're leaving enough room for the steam to be able to go through. So we have a list that tells me I can only put 5 screwdrivers on a shelf. I can only put 10 mop heads on a shelf. That kind of helps us kind of guide us that we do not overstuff. So anytime that we are unloading from the sterilizer, we always want to check and make sure that our indicator tape has changed colors. Here on the right, we have more of the clear white parallel striping. This is a package that has not been sterilized. It has not reached the temperature to say that it's sterile. And then on the left side, we have the sterilizer tape that has the dark stripes. So first thing I'm gonna check, I'm gonna make sure
Okay, it looks like Ruth lost signal. I'll give her a few more moments to log back on. Her computer might have died on her. Everybody just hang tight for me. I am trying to get a hold of Ruth, see what happened.
Hey, Brianna, I am back. Okay,
Hi, Ruth.
is everybody still here? I hooked my charger up to my couch and didn't realize my dog had knocked the charger from the couch to the wall out. So I'm thinking I'm charging and I was still not charging.
I told everybody, I was like, I have a feeling her computer died.
I'm like, oh my goodness.
But
Okay,
everybody stayed with us, so.
thank you. I'm sorry about that, guys. So let me, because I'm normally on my dock that charges it for me. So okay, so let me get my PowerPoint back up and we'll be ready to roll. What's this?
Did we lose Ruth again?
I think she's trying to load her PowerPoint.
Okay, Brianna, I think you have to let me screen share again. It has host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay.
I promise, guys, this never does exciting for me doing the meeting. So.
Hi, yes, please. Please clean. Yes, thank you.
Okay, are you guys able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, so before, I don't know why this is up here canceling. Okay, before my technical problems, we were discussing when we take an item out of the steam sterilizer, what do I need to check before I use it? Say, for example, we had some forceps in the steam sterilizer, and I'm going about my day doing my job, and I need these forceps to pick up an item off the machine deck. So before I say that I can use the forceps, I'm gonna check and make sure that this sterilizer tape has changed colors. So here, it was white opaque before, it went through the steaming process and it turned dark. And then also, some packages will tell you, like here it says bar darkens when steam processed. So here, the bar was a light bluish color, and then now through steam processing, it turned a purple color. So for this particular type of pouch, we will have two indications that it was steam sterilized, and then I'm gonna also check my date on my sticker that makes sure that I'm within my expiration before I actually use the item. Okay, so that was our steam sterilization process to remove microorganisms from items that we need to use in the APA. A second option that we can use to kill germs, microorganisms is radiation. So radiation works by actually breaking the chemical bonds in the DNA of the organism, and then it dies. So we use gamma rays that penetrate the cell wall. The bacteria can no longer maintain viability, and it's gonna die. We're gonna kill it. However, the gamma rays can be harmful to us. So when we use the radiation, it's inside a shielded area that we call our gamma irradiator. And here's an actual picture of some of the cells inside the irradiator that are gonna be shooting those gamma rays to the bacteria to kill them from our bottles, from our caps, to make sure that we have those to be germ-free. So we have two different methods of sterilization that we've discussed so far. We have moist heat that uses one way to sterilize, and then we have radiation that uses another method to sterilize. Anyone recall what moist heat uses or radiation? You can unmute and answer, or you can put the answer in the chat box.
Moist heat is the steam.
Yep, that is absolutely correct. We're gonna use our pressurized steam. That is correct. Anybody want to take a shot at radiation?
Is it ETO?
The ETO is the gas. The radiation, that's our ethylene oxide. We haven't got to that one yet in detail. Radiation is gonna use the gamma rays. That's the one we have to make sure when we're using it in a facility that we have it shielded properly so that we don't have gamma rays, escaping and giving anybody, radiation poisoning or anything like that in your facility. So if you're working in an area that's using radiation, most of them have to go through like a federal security clearance, because they have to account for all the radioactive material to make sure nobody's taking it home and trying to make illegal bombs or anything with, the cobalt or anything like that. So if you ever in that area and they approach you about doing an additional security screening or additional background checks, that's why, because they do have to account for that radioactive material. All right, the next one we're gonna cover is our ethylene oxide, the ETO. So ethylene oxide, it works by also disrupting the DNA in the microorganism as well. So the ETO, we also have to protect our employees from that because it can be toxic, explosive, and carcinogenic. So it's highly regulated. And for our ETO sterilization, most companies do not perform that themselves. Because it's so, we have to keep it regulated so much. We actually have a contract facility that handles our ETO sterilization. And what we use our ETO for is some of our bottles are sensitive to the gamma ray process, or they will not fit in our containers that we use. So the components that are ETO sterilized, we put them in a packaging at the contract facility that is gas permeable, which means as the ethylene oxide is released, it's able to go through the plastic, sterilize what's inside the plastic by disrupting the DNA of those microorganisms. And then now those bottles are essentially germ-free. We package them in multiple layers, so they'll have 2 to 3 bags, where the innermost packaging we consider to be sterile. So we design a pass-in process where we remove the different layers of those bags. So once it gets into our APA area, now you have a sterilized bag that we have not touched with our bare hands. So that way the contents of that innermost bag are gonna be sterile.
Ruth, we do have a chat from Lamont Edwards. He said,
Okay.
so moist heat uses steam and radiation uses gamma.
Yes, that is correct. Our moist heat uses our pressurized steam. We have radiation that uses our gamma rays, and ETO that uses gas. So depending on what you're trying to sterilize and its tolerance kind of guides which one of those 4 options. Well, we haven't covered the fourth one yet, which is filtration. It covers which sterilization method you're gonna use. So you'll see a company use a combination most time of all 4, depending on where they are in the process. I may use steam here, I'm gonna use gas here, and then I'll use my radiation and to sterilize different items.
Ruth,
very
do you
good.
know for airlines, are they using the radiation when they sanitize the planes? Or how, do you have, is that,
You mean like when they sanitize them in between passengers?
yes,
I don't think they wouldn't have time to radiate the seats in between, because radiation is what we do when we radiate is we have these big metal containers, kind of like a big metal box, and they're on a train track that moves. So the metal container goes to different stops along that train track, and the gamma rays shoot at, basically they shoot themselves at what's inside that container. And then it'll say, okay, well, I have to stay at this stop for 2 minutes, and then I have to go to my next stop for 2 minutes. And then so it may take us 2 hours to get one container through all those gamma ray stops. I know airlines use high efficiency particulate filters, which we're gonna cover as well, where the air that comes into the plane is like 99.9% clean filtered air. So it's probably like some of the best air you could breathe. But they wouldn't have time to radiate in between seats. I think most of them are wiping with like a Lysol.
great, thanks.
You're welcome. All right, so our last method we're gonna cover is sterile filtration. So this is a way for us to remove microorganisms from fluid without adversely affecting the product. So it's designed to prevent contamination as well from drug products that claim to be sterile. So let's say we're making a nausea medicine for children, for babies. And I have 20 different ingredients that go into this medication. Of course, we don't want to give babies, we don't want to give anybody anything that's gonna, possibly make them sick or cause them harm. So I have my 25 different ingredients in this mixture, and they can't be heated up. So we can't steam sterilize them because let's say chemical A cannot withstand heat, it degrades. So we have to figure a different way for me to prevent contamination in this product when I can't steam, I can't use gas, and I can't use radiation. And this is where we come into sterile filtration. So how sterile filtration works is, let's say that this top image above the gray Swiss cheese is our solution. This is our nausea medicine for the babies. The blue little circles are what we want to have in our end product. The purple circles are particles. These could be harmful or not harmful, but regardless, they're particles that we do not want in our final solution. So how sterile filtration works is we're going to use a filter that has holes that are big enough to capture the purple non-wanted particles, but they let the blue good product pass through. So as this filtrate goes through the filter, our purple non-wanted molecules are caught in the filter, and then we end up with our final filtrate, which is our good product that only has the blue circles. The reason we worry about the size of a molecule is molecules themselves are not always inherently harmful. What they become is known as vectors, basically a germ kind of catching a Uber or a Lyft to go from point A to point B. Where if I'm a microorganism, I can't necessarily move around on my own. But if I'm able to attach myself to a particle in the air, now I can move from location to location. So that's why we take into account the size of a particle when we're trying to prevent it from being in our final product. And then here on the right-hand side, we have a graph that's kind of showing from a 1 centimeter going down by folds of 10, how small some of these bacteria and viruses can be. So they're not visible. Most of them are not visible to the naked eye until you have a colony that's formed. And then you're able to see them with your naked eye unaided without using a microscope. So when we do a sterile filtration, oftentimes we use what are called redundant filters. So there's going to be 2 filters on top of each other that have the same size holes. So the goal is, let's say that for some reason, I was able to slip by that first filter if I'm a purple molecule of contamination. When I go through my second filter, the odds are very unlikely that I'm gonna make it through both of these filters at the same time. So we have our top filter here, and then we have our bottom filter here. We will have our liquid coming in. It's going through one filter, going through our second filter, and then now we will have our filtrate at the bottom that's been filtered not once, but twice. So that's a common setup that you'll see in your equipment in the APA area. So integrity testing is something that we do for our sterile filtration systems. So we test the filter before we use it to make sure that it's built properly. These are built by hand. They are clamps. There are fittings that are put together at the company. They have a process that's gonna tell you, this is how we build our air filters, this is how we build our liquid filters. However, you can have parts inside that filter fail, or a person can misbuild the filter. So we check before we use them to try to detect build issues, which is the most common cause of failures. And then we also check after we use the filter. And we do that to make sure if we had a failure while the filter was in use, now we can separate that product, try to find a root cause. And then if the product is non-conforming, we can call the product or throw it away. And if the product is good to use, we can justify why it's safe for us to use the product. And then we always document these tests. It's a regulatory requirement that makes sure that our product produced within a filter that has been compromised, that we throw it away. But you can't know if it's compromised if you don't test it. So that covers us in that aspect as well. And this abbreviation here is the Code of Federal Regulations, which we will cover in, I believe, the quality class. We'll go into more details on what this publication is and its authority and how it's used by the FDA and by auditors to make companies stay compliant, make sure we're making quality product, and most importantly, that we're making a safe product for consumers. All right, so just the reminders about the filter sterilization. We do sterilize before we use it. We make sure sterility is maintained. And then some opportunities for contamination is anytime we take a filter off, when we install a filter, during our cleaning, our steaming process, and during our integrity testing. Anytime where we have a human interaction with that filter, there's a risk for contamination. So integrity testing of filters is important. Why do you guys think that it's important for us to make sure those filters are operating properly? You can unmute if you would like, or answer in the chat box if anybody has any ideas why is it important that we test these filters?
Because you don't want to introduce any unknown impurities.
Yep, very good. We don't want to increase contamination. We want to make sure our build is sound. Yeah. Anybody else have anything to add to his answer? So let's say that we took a filter down and we did the integrity test and it failed. We're like, oh, this filter was not running properly, and we've been using this filter, let's say, for 2 weeks. What do you guys think might happen or would be a consequence to that product that we've ran for those 2 weeks if now we know the filter was not properly working at the time?
You would have to
Any
pull it.
ideas?
You'd have,
Okay,
you'd have to pull it, get rid of it.
Yep. Yep, that product would be segregated, it would be pulled, it would be put on hold. And then more than likely, we would have to do a formal investigation, and the product would more than likely ultimately be culled. We don't ever want to take the risk of product getting out and harming somebody. Anything that goes, into our bodies is always a risk. So we don't want to knowingly place anyone in any type of danger with our product. So it's always safer to cull in-house versus getting out into the market and causing somebody harm.
Which is what happened recently with the baby formula from Abbott, correct?
Yes, that's on one of my quality slides. That is exactly what happened. With Abbott, they found cyanobacteria, I want to say it was. And they were able, when they went to the facility, they found additional strains there. So then it becomes, we have to figure out where this bacteria is coming from. Is it that we're not cleaning thoroughly? Is it that maybe the bacteria has become immune to what we're cleaning with? Maybe the bacteria was able to have some kind of mutation and now it's not responding. It could be, is it from our water supply? Is our water supply contaminated? Is our machinery damaged and we have hiding spots? It's a myriad of different problem solving they have to go through to try to find that, but it is exactly what happened to them. And we were able to see it when people couldn't get their children formula, because if the FDA says we have to shut you down, unfortunately, creating a inconvenience for consumers is always less important than keeping us safe. That the most important thing is making sure we're buying safe product. So exactly what happened. So how do we know any of these processes work? How do we know the steam works? How do we know the filtering works? All of that. We use what's called validation. So we go through cycles that are going to simulate our normal use. And we use what are called biological indicators. This is going to be a known organism. So I may say, okay, this is a mold. This is mold 124. And I'm going to place this in different areas of my line. And then I'm going to go through my normal cleaning process. And then I'm going to go back and I'm going to see, is this mold still on my biological indicator? If it's not there, hey, our cleaning process works, it's validated. I'm going to document all of my testing. But if it's still there, then we have some more troubleshooting to do. Do we need to change how we clean? Do we need to change the frequency? Would we change what we clean with? We had an instance where we had an organism that had basically become immune to what we were using. So if, let's say I have 1,000 bacteria and I'm using Lysol, and out of those 1,000, I have one bacteria that somehow survived the Lysol. So now that one bacteria can multiply and become 50. So the next time I clean, now I have 50 that are now resistant to the Lysol, and then they multiply. So we had to do a study and go back and say, hey, this chemical that we're using, our organisms have become immune to it. We have to change. And then we had to go through a validation process and start using a different cleaning chemical as well to make sure that we were getting all our organisms cleaned and killed properly. All right, so before we go to facility design, do you guys have any questions on anything we've talked about so far? Any comments? Feel free to unmute or you can add in the chat before we go to this next section. Okay, I'm gonna assume everybody is good to go. So next we're gonna move to facility design. So our APA, that's our specific area inside our plant where we're doing our aseptic processing. If we're making cough syrup, we're gonna have our packaging line that's putting the labels on, they're putting the cartons on, we're gonna have our warehouse, we're gonna have all these auxiliary areas. But our APA, that's our core area where we're actually taking our sterile bottles, our sterile cough syrup, our sterile caps, and we're putting them together to one cohesive bottle of cough syrup in that area. So what we have to do is we have to design our APA area to try to mitigate and eliminate contamination risk. So contamination can happen many different ways, but there's 3 that stand out as the top contributors. Number 1, 80% of contamination in clean rooms comes from personnel, comes from the people that are working in the area. 15% comes from tools and equipment, which we minimize that by doing our cleaning, by doing our sanitizing, by doing our sterilizing. And then 5%, which is a small percentage compared to the other 2, is actually coming from the environment. So that means it's coming from your floor, it's coming from our air, it's coming from our water. So one way that we design facilities to control contaminations is we do what's called ISO classifications. So 3 common ones that you'll see is ISO 8. This is our less critical areas. This is going to be our entrances and our exits. They're going to be our transition areas. That we normally say in our ISO 8 area, that's going to be our locker rooms before we change into our scrubs. So we can't have candy, we can't have cell phones, we don't bring personal items. So we are beginning to eliminate contamination risk. One prime example is every spring when pollen first starts to fall, we see personnel recoveries increase because we're outside and we have pollen on our clothes, we have pollen on our skin. And it's typically higher for the second shift employees because we're out and about in the day. A lot of people don't have time to go home and shower before they go to work. And it's on our skin and it becomes a vector for microorganisms. Even though it's as small as pollen is, it's big enough for a microorganism to kind of hitch a ride on us, and then it follows us into the APA, and now we have a recovery. So that's one way we kind of start to get a control on contamination. Then from ISO 8, we move to ISO 7. So now we've made it through our locker rooms, we're in our clean room area, but we're not inside our machinery that's putting the cough syrup in the bottle. This is gonna be, I'm in my APA, I'm looking through the door and I'm looking at Brianna running the machine, but I'm not in there with her running the machine. So ISO 7, we can't have cell phones, jewelry, phone, well, I cover phones, jewelry, makeup, depending on, let's say that you're working somewhere that's doing injectables. Some places don't allow you to wear contacts because that's something that could fall out of your eye and be unaccounted for or virtually be impossible to find. And then from ISO 7, we move to ISO 5. This is gonna bring the area, this is gonna be Brianna in the room running the machine that's filling the bottles with the cough syrup and putting the caps on the bottle. This is the most critical area, the most classified area. This is the highest risk for contamination because I'm the closest to the product. I'm right in the area where all 3 of them are coming together. So these are gonna be areas that we also surround them with plexiglass doors, soft wall curtain barriers as well to add an additional layer to try to keep microorganisms out. And we also, the ISO 5 is the core of what we do in maintaining that as well. So in our ISO 5 area, we use what are called high efficiency particulate air filters, also known as HEPAs. When you're on a plane and the air and they start to pressurize the cabin, that pressurized air is coming through a HEPA filter, 99.997% filtered air. And what it does is it's a mechanical air filter that forces the air through very, very, very fine mesh, and it's gonna trap any harmful particles. So here in the ceiling, is our HEPA filters. And this is a silent video. So I'm just gonna show you guys kind of how they place them in the ceiling. And when they design the area, they have to go through a strategic mapping of one HEPA filter covers, let's say 500 square feet. And that way they know, okay, this is where we have to put our filters at. And you can see them here, these gray, all of these are HEPA filters. The white tiles, those are just regular ceiling tiles, and then the black balls, those are cameras. So as you can see, they have them pretty frequent in the ceiling, filtering that air that's coming through. So that's gonna help us minimize where we had the environmental contamination. That's one way that we minimize that is by filtering the air that's coming in. And also what the HEPA filters do is they create what's known as unidirectional laminar airflow. Laminar airflow is where your air moves in a defined manner, controlled velocity and direction. So here, this is also a silent video. This is smoke. We use the smoke only so that we can visualize the air. That's the only reason why we use it. And we are able to actually go into a line and we can see how my air is flowing. Is it flowing in the correct direction?
A contaminant is anything that shouldn't be there.
This is a video that you guys have to watch on your own. That was starting to play from the YouTube list. So here, I'm able to see the air is coming down and it's going to the right. Also here, I'm able to see it's going down and it's coming out this door. So this is an image of the plexiglass doors. So here we have our bottles, and these white images here are the caps. So these bottles have been filled, they have been capped. On the walls, we have what is known as return vents. So this air has come down from our HEPA filter in the ceiling, and it's gonna go through our machine, and it's gonna come out the machine and go to a return, and then it's gonna go back up and it's gonna be re-filtered again. So we wanna make sure that our air is moving in the right direction so that it doesn't create any turbulence. Turbulence is where we have air that is disruptive. And let's say that we have air that has touched the floor. I wouldn't want the air that has touched the floor where we've been walking, pushing different machines and those sorts of things. I wouldn't want that air to be coming in contact with my bottles. So we purposely control how the air flows. And then through our validation process, we do a smoke study, we actually record these. So if somebody was to say, hey, I want to see the smoke study you did on line 6 in 2022, I can pull up and show them the smoke study that, hey, we know we have control of the airflow in this area, and that we don't have any turbulence that could possibly create any air. And then here in this far right, you actually have a tank that's full of solution. So this operator would be here, running the machinery behind this gentleman, taking solution from this tank and filling those bottles in that classified area. So first air is air that has come from a HEPA, from our high efficiency particulate air filters in the ceiling that has not touched any other surface. That's known as first air. We say first air because the first thing we want that air to touch is our fingertips. We use our fingertips to push buttons. We use our fingertips to do interventions. So we want our fingertips to be the cleanest part on our person when we're in the clean room. And the ISO 5 areas are designed so that first air passes over those components. So let's say, for instance, we have a bottle. For some reason, something was able to make it through that bottle. That the way we design the ISO 5 area is that's our last chance to get rid of that contamination. And then we keep the velocity high enough that any contaminants in that area, we're gonna push it out, and we use that as our final line of defense to protect the product. So here we have this gentleman, his hands are up, away from his body, in front of himself. So when the air comes down from above, there's no blockage between that air and him, where now that air has been contaminated before it touches his hands. So this is a posture that we commonly use in our APA area. Takes a little adjusting to get used to, because most people, we walk with our hands down by our side. So it takes kind of some conscious effort to say, hey, I'm in the inside, let me put my hands up in first air. So that we keep our hands clean, keep our fingertips clean as possible. So with microorganisms being able to essentially hitch a ride on particles in the air and travel from from room to room or from line to line, why do we think air quality would be important for pharmaceutical manufacturing? You can unmute and answer, or answer in the chat. Anybody have any ideas?
Just to make sure that environmental factors don't enter into the area in the different ISO stages.
Yep, very, very good. We want to make sure we're keeping contamination down. We're keeping cross-contamination down. Of course, there's no 100% certainty with contamination, but we have to do what we can do to mitigate that. So by controlling our air quality, that's one way we keep particles down. If we keep particles down, microorganisms have less vectors, they have less ways to move around, less contamination, less cross-contamination. So we have a gentleman here in our image. Do we think he's observing first air? He has his hands down by his side.
No, because his hands are supposed to be raised and away from his body.
Yep, his hands should be up, raised. That way there's no there's no encumbrance, there's no obstacle between the first air and himself. Because how he is now, let's say we have air coming down here, it's touched his head, it's touched his shoulder, went down his arms, now it's on his hands. So let's say he has some type of contamination here, or let's say he was coughing and should have went out and gown, and he's like, no, it was okay, it was just a little cough. And let's say that it's more, than a cough. Now you run the risk of the coughing that you did here coming down, and now it's on your hands, and I can go pick up a phone, and then somebody else picks up that phone or a pen, and now you have a cross-contamination risk. Very good. All right, microbiology 101. We'll cover micro in depth. This is just kind of an overview to kind of lead us into the next section. So microbiology, that's the study of single cell organisms. They're subvisible. We cannot see them with the naked eye. And they have growth requirements: food, water, temperature. Some microorganisms can live without water. Some can live in extreme heat, extreme cold, but they do have to have whatever their requirements are for life, for them to be viable and continue to grow. So to keep the size of bacteria kind of in the back of our mind, here's bacillus cells on the tip of a pen. Looking at it here, you can't really see the individual bacilli themselves. Then if we magnify this, now I can start to see, okay, there's a little more, there's something orange going on here. They would have stained these cells to make them visible under the microscope, a different color. And then now I magnify it again, and now I can see these are actually individual microorganism cells just from the tip of a pen. And if we were to look at it with the naked eye, we would not be able to see those. And then here we're comparing the size of common bacteria to the width of a human hair. So we have some cocci, some rhiz, and some spirochetes. And compared to a human hair, which we know is pretty thin, we can see them, but they're pretty thin themselves. These are their relative size compared to the width of a hair. So a hair is 50 times bigger than what this cocci is. So very, very, very small, but can be very powerful, very harmful, depending on what they are. So bacteria, they're the most abundant form of life on Earth. They outnumber human cells 10 to 1. We have normal bacteria flora that we use that are beneficial to us. We have our stomach, for instance, our digestive tract that helps us digest our food. So if you were to weigh all the cells in your body, 2 to 4% of your body mass is bacteria that we use that are beneficial to us. And we have over 10,000 different bacteria that can occupy the human ecosystem. So they are very, very, very plentiful. So patient impact. So for Bausch & Lomb, we make solution that can go directly into your eye, and we make solutions that consumers use to clean their contacts. So we talked about bacteria. We have bacteria on our body. It occurs naturally. No matter how much we bathe, no matter what we do, we're gonna have bacteria on our bodies and in our body. So what could happen if some of that bacteria that is safe for me to have, for instance, in my stomach, is unsafe for me to put in my eye? So depending on what that bacteria is, could determine what happens. So going back to the Abbott with the baby formula shortage, there are 4 main consequences to impacted product. By impacted product, we mean product that we made that is not to the specifications that we told the FDA we were going to make our product. So if we tell the FDA we're going to make sterile vitamin supplements, by purporting that we're sterile, we're free of microorganisms. That's what they expect us to make as a company. That's what consumers expect to buy when they go to Target or Walmart or Amazon to buy these products. That's what they're expecting. So anytime we have a product that does not conform, it is considered impacted product. And you can run a full gamut from adulterated product, which is one where, hey, we have a filter that failed yesterday at 3 o'clock. We figured it out today at 9 o'clock. Everything produced from 3 o'clock to 9 o'clock today, we have to throw it away. It cost us $5,000. We caught it in-house. We're gonna take a monetary loss, but it's not as bad. Then you get to harming patients. This is where you made a bad product knowingly or unknowingly, and somebody is now harmed. They've filed a complaint, they've gotten a lawyer or something to that effect, where their doctor has reported a adverse event, where now we've been notified that possibly our product has done harm. So depending on what that harm is, how severe it is, you can get into recalls. There was one a couple weeks ago with a ready to eat sandwich product that was meat and cheese together. It was ready to eat. So that means that people were expecting that they could eat this meat without heating it up. So an auditor went to this plant and noticed that they were making raw sausage that has to be cooked on the same machine of product that did not need to be cooked. And they made the sausage first. There was no ample cleaning between those two processes, which means that if I bought this ready to eat meat, and let's say that I didn't want to make a grilled cheese out of it or whatever, I just want to take it out the pack and eat it because you told me I could possibly have been eating raw sausage residue. And they issued a recall saying, if you bought this product and it has this lot number on it, don't eat it because it's possibly contaminated with raw sausage. The FDA has a website where they any audit observations, they list that, and this recall was on CNN when they recalled this one. Before our next class, I'll try to go back and find it so I can show it to you guys. So of course, for that brand in America, brand recognition is very important. So I may say, I think I saw something about them on CNN. I don't think I'm gonna buy this product. Even if it's a completely different product, people may associate the two together, and then now you're suffering a business loss, which can, hurt your employees, hurt your bottom line, and kind of trickle down. So you can go to recalls, and then in the case of Abbott, you get to production shutdown. This is where the FDA comes in. They have the right to say, hey, you cannot make anything else right now until we figure out what is going on. We can't risk it getting out into the market. So we try to most of the time, all of the time, if possible, we want to live in this first box. We want to be adulterated product. We're gonna have machine failures. That's part of running high-speed equipment. But we want to definitely not get into a place where we're harming patients, recalls, and shutdowns, if at all possible. So here's just one example from a ophthalmic product standpoint. This is pink eye conjunctivitis caused by viral and bacterial infections. This is one reason why, if you're working in a clean room facility, if you are sick or you are displaying symptoms that could possibly be contagious, they will not allow you to work in that area. They may say, okay, well, you can go work on this paperwork that's away from the product and maybe put a mask on or something to that effect, but they're gonna protect the customer from possible issues such as pink eye, where I came in, let's say I had a stomach bug or I had a respiratory issue going on and I coughed on my suit and I contaminated the product, and now this bacteria has gotten in somebody's eye, and now we have a patient with pink eye. And then here's the one about I didn't put the actual name, but the baby formula recall in 2022. And at the time that I made this, there had been 4 illnesses, 2 deaths in 3 states. And this is Abbott with the name change to ABC. I called it Cyanobacter, but it was Coronabacter. That was found in the powdered infant formula. So recalls do happen. Production shutdowns do happen. So we want to try to always make sure that as individuals, we're doing what we can to mitigate any harm to our patients. Yeah, and then we already discussed what could be a consequence of this recall. As we know, there was a severe shortage of baby formula. Almost, some stores were having to ration it, where you were only allowed X amount of containers of formula, and you had people that were selling breast milk and stuff to try to help other consumers out. So this was a real life example here. All right, and this is gonna be our last section. Anybody have any questions or comments on any of that before we intro into environmental monitoring, which we'll finish up in the next section? Okay. So environmental monitoring. So if we recall, the three main contributors of contamination, we have our personnel with a whopping 80%, and then we have our environment that's 5%. So we know that it's a risk for the environment to contribute to contamination. How do we monitor that risk? How do we keep track of it? How do we document that our water is good? How do we document our air quality? That's where our environmental monitoring comes into place. So 1938, the FDA Food and Drug Cosmetic Act and our Code of Federal Regulations, Part 600 to 799, deals with food and drugs. So the FDA monitors the environment as well, the USP, as well as the ISO, the International Standards Organization. This is where we get our ISO classifications from. Since most companies ship internationally, we have our FDA that we have to be accountable to, as well as other regulatory bodies as well. So they all have their different codes on how they want us to monitor the environment. So we monitor our critical areas on a regular basis. We use what are called sampling plates and particulate counters. This is a picture of a sampling plate. So on this plate is called agar. It's basically a form of germ food, like a all-you-can-eat buffet for germs. So if I take that plate and I touch it to a surface, it's going to pick up any bacteria that were on that surface. And let's say it only had one or two. Because the agar is so rich with nutrients that germs need to thrive, those one or two bacteria are gonna multiply. And I'm gonna put them in a nice warm environment. So now they have the temperature that they prefer as well. So now those one or two bacteria have now become 100 or 400 or 500. And now I can use my microbiology machinery to figure out what that exact bacteria is, what strain it is. And then we can say, okay, well, this is something that normally occurs on people. Okay, it probably came off of a person. If it's a mold that is not known to, normally be on personnel, then we would need to do a little more investigation to find out where is this mold coming from. So that helps us, as well as monitoring the air as well. So as part of our environmental monitoring, we check the floors, the walls, equipment, personnel. They take water samples, and then we also test the air for particulate concentration. We have a counter, which we'll go over next section, that actually counts how many particles of a particular size are in an air sample. So it'll tell you had 400 particles that were 0.5 microns in 10 minutes. And we have a guidance that tells us if my air is clean, statistically, this is all I should have. And this is how many of this size I should have. And then they're gonna monitor direction, pressure, and velocity as well. So this is a picture of one of those sampling plates with the agar. And each one of these round dots is considered a colony. So this grew from one single cell. And as they multiplied, we were able to then begin to visualize them on a plate, and then we can actually identify the bacteria from there. So this surface looks like it was a very contaminated surface possibly. Or it could be a test plate that they did just just to get a picture. So we know that the environment is a contamination risk. 5% of contamination in clean rooms comes from the environment. So why do we think monitoring the environment would be important to aseptic processing? Anybody want to take a shot at that? You can unmute or answer in the chat. So we would say that environmental monitoring is important because it allows us to, number one, show that our environment is clean, it is sterile, it's contaminant free. And then also by monitoring the environment, we can look for what are called trends, where if we keep seeing a certain bacteria in a certain location, we can start to investigate to see, okay, why is this bacteria showing up on only line 4? It's only on line 4. And we can try to get ahead of what might become a later issue and get that area back in control. So trending is also a benefit of monitoring as well. So you can basically head off a problem before it becomes a bigger problem. Yep, so that's the end of this section. Next session, which is next week, I want to say same day, same time, and I will be on my dock with my charges, so we won't have technical issues. Again, I apologize for that. We will go over environmental monitoring more in detail. I'll show you guys the air samplers that we use. We'll go over how we monitor the personnel, which is, of course, a huge part of our monitoring program because 80% of contamination comes from people. Our biggest goal in the APA is maintaining sterility while keeping the products safe, most importantly from our employees, because we are lovely germ carriers, making sure that we're not harming our patients. There is a video for you guys to watch with a few questions that goes over environmental monitoring as well. It's a YouTube video, and there should be an option for you to turn on closed captioning if you need it. It's a little dated video, but the material is very relevant. So when you watch it, it's kind of grainy compared to what we have now, but the material in itself is very valuable as that process doesn't change. Do you guys have any questions, comments on anything that we've discussed so far today?
I do not. Thank you, Ruth. That was great.
Thank you. Everybody else okay? No questions? If you guys think of anything after you get off, you can always send it to Joy and she'll forward it to me, or you can jot it down when we do our next session and we can go over it. So I know aseptic processing is a little bit different. Just keep in mind we're still doing a manufacturing process. We just have to keep the product safe from the employees and keep it safe from the environment, so our consumer is getting a safe and effective product. So if nobody has any questions, that's all I have for you guys. Brianna, do you have anything else for them?
There are no chats in the chat box. I don't have anything else for him. Make sure that you do watch your YouTube videos.
All right, well, thank you guys. Y'all have a good week, and I'll see you guys same time next week.
You as well, Ruth. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.